I'm interested in doing a reading today on the astrology of nuclear meltdowns, a documentary that came out recently on Netflix called 3 Mile Island. It's actually called Meltdown. So I did some research and the charts were really interesting. They are very much related to Uranus, and Uranus is in an earth sign right now. They're related to Uranus. They can be related to earthquakes. Uranus rules earthquakes. It also rules nuclear power, and it rules breakdowns, shocks and surprises. Normally, when we're thinking about a meltdown, we're thinking about the impact on life. I suppose one of the there are two major differences between an earthquake and a nuclear meltdown, one being that an earthquake is natural. I suppose you could say that there are connections to human behavior, which we could go into because I actually do think there are connections. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that an earthquake, while there are lasting impacts, it's not like radiation. Let me go ahead and show you these charts and we can look at the similarities, and then I'll explain why I think we've got a signature coming up that has some similarities. So let's see. Since I've got the tsunami of March 11th up already, we'll go ahead and show you what was going on with this. Now, this isn't the exact same day as the Fukushima meltdown, but there's definitely something interesting about this chart. And of course, the meltdown happened within a few days afterward. I don't remember exactly how many days, but not more than a week. And also don't know the exact time. But if we wanted to get more accurate, we could find that information. So anyway, what's interesting here is the exact day of the earthquake on March 11, 2011, Uranus was changing signs from Pisces to Aries. Uranus rules earthquakes, which includes tsunamis and volcanoes and things like that. And it was shifting out of a water sign. So as you can see here, and this, I just randomly chose this time because that's what time it was when I made the chart. It was at 29 degrees, 58 minutes. So it's virtually the final degree. And it's getting ready to shift to Aries, which is a fire sign. So guess what? Here it is, Uranus, the ruler of earthquakes in a water sign. What do we get? We get this earthquake, an enormous tsunami that then hits the coast of Japan. Uranus moves into Aries, which is fire, and boom.
Meltdown.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting, Jupiter was there and Mercury was there. Mercury, well, I should say Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. So Uranus is also technology. Uranus also rules nuclear power, nuclear energy, okay? Because it rules technology. Now, Mercury is also a technological planet, but because Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, it rules what we might call the higher technologies, more advanced technology. Whereas Mercury rules either more like the older, more established technologies or technologies related to our daily activities, like the way we communicate with each other, the way we move around, our normal daily activities. Whereas Uranus is more like the advanced, more global kinds of technology. Even Mercury somewhat rules the internet, but Uranus is more like it rules the global internet. It would rule AI. It would rule nuclear power. It would rule space travel, so much more advanced futuristic global technologies, whereas Mercury is just our day-to-day, like getting on the computer, us talking on Zoom. That's more of a Mercury kind of thing. But it is interesting that both of them are there in Aries. Also, we have Jupiter. Jupiter expands everything it touches. And so think about what we're coming up to. If you guys have been paying attention to where the planets are, we're coming up to another time period with the same kinds of alignments. Now, Uranus is not going to be in Aries, it's in Taurus, and it's not changing signs, but it is still relevant because Taurus is an earth sign. There may be some other stuff going on. We'll have to look and see. But I know for sure that Jupiter is in Aries right now, and Mercury, I believe, is still in Aquarius. But by the time we get to, say, March, April time period, Mercury will also be in Aries, okay? So let's see what else we can say about this. Some things I don't know if they are relevant or not, but it is interesting that Neptune, the ruler of water, oceans, seas, bodies of water, was in Aquarius, and Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, and it's also in a 29th degree. So, it's like by itself, this probably wouldn't mean anything. I wouldn't like feel any significant concerns about Neptune being at 29 degrees of Aquarius. I think the combination just added to this meltdown, because Neptune rules dissolution. It rules meltdown. Think about the flooding that occurred. Now, it's at 29 degrees, 12 minutes, so it wouldn't have changed signs that day. Like Uranus literally changed signs. Neptune wouldn't have changed signs that day, but it is interesting how close it is to changing signs from Aquarius, which was ruled by Uranus, into Pisces, its own sign. So that there's this flooding issue. The moon was in a square to Neptune, so that's interesting because the moon also impacts flooding. The moon itself affects tides, so it affects bodies of water. So I do think it's interesting that the moon was square to Neptune at that time. And then here's another one that's really relevant. Pluto is in a square to Jupiter. Now, keep that in mind, because Pluto and Uranus both are related to nuclear power.
Yes.
Uranus is related because of the technology and also because of uranium. And Pluto is related because of plutonium. And plutonium, Pluto also rules Earth, like the Earth, because he's God of the underworld. So he rules things that come out of the Earth. So I think that these are I know that these are relevant because they're part of the signature. Okay. Now we could go on and look at, and we can come back at this if you forget, but I think the most important thing to remember is Jupiter was in Aries, Mercury was in Aries, Uranus was literally changing signs that day from Pisces to Aries, and Pluto was in a square to Jupiter. Okay, now we'll go and look at, I think we'll look at 3 Mile Island. Again, notice the date. So the other one was March 11th. This is March 28th. We have a new moon in Aries. And I got the exact time from the documentary. Okay.
Wow.
This is when what happened was, and we can talk about the Chernobyl. What happened at 3 Mile Island was that there was a valve that wasn't functioning properly and it locked open, and this was important. Of course, I don't know what, like in all the functioning, I don't know exactly what impact that had, but anyway, it malfunctioned and it locked open, and they actually like felt this boom and heard it, and I don't know what other impacts it had, but they noticed that something was wrong. Like it wasn't like they were just sitting around smoking cigarettes and had no idea something was happening. No, they knew, because it went boom. And it may have like turned out the lights or something, some kind of warning may have gone off. So they did know something was wrong, but they didn't know what it was. So apparently they went and did, they examined what was going on, tried to figure out what was wrong. I think they may have actually known at that time that the valve was stuck open. But anyway, everything seemed to go back to normal. So they thought it's not going to be a big deal. So they didn't freak out about it. Okay. But within a few hours, then they started to get this massive warning signals going off. So then they knew something had seriously gone wrong, and they shut down the reactor. And then there were consequences beyond that, which had to do with why they had to release the gases and stuff, so they release these radiated gases into the air. So anyway, it certainly could have been worse, because if you look at 3 Mile Island compared to Chernobyl, compared to Fukushima, 3 Mile Island was nothing compared to Chernobyl, and still a big deal. Because first of all, it was the first major nuclear meltdown. So 3 Mile Island was a big deal, but still not as bad as the other two. And I think it's pretty much, as far as I know, it's we've never had a nuclear reactor problem like this. I know they closed in Colorado, they closed down Rocky Flat, which I don't know. I don't think that was a reactor. I think it was actually nuclear weapons plant. And then St. Vrain was, I believe, a nuclear power plant, and I don't know what the status is of that, but I think that they did close it down. So as far as I know, we haven't had any other problems similar, as even close to 3 Mile Island in this country. But still, again, this is a big deal. It was still the first major nuclear accident, and as far as I know, the only one in this country that was that bad. So let's look at the alignments again. We have a new moon in Aries. Now, again, I really think this Aries is important. It's a fire sign. I don't think it's random. So we've got the new moon in Aries. Again, I really think that the Aries is important. It is a fire sign. We've got Mercury at 29 degrees of Pisces. Again, we've got Mars in Pisces. We had that before, the one I looked at earlier, which I think was Fukushima, which I think is interesting because Mars rules Aries and it also rules water. Pisces is ruled by Neptune, which, as I said, rules bodies of water and dissolution, meltdown. It's also interesting that Mars is conjunct the South Node. And in the earlier chart, I noticed that Pluto was pretty close to the South Node. And here we have Venus at 29 degrees of Aquarius. So it's interesting that, and then Jupiter's at 29 degrees of Cancer, a water sign. So it's interesting that we see a lot of these planets at 29 degrees when this happens. And I think that is a quality of the 29th degree. We looked at the chart for Fukushima. We're looking at the chart for 3 Mile Island, and then we're going to look at the chart for Chernobyl. And I was pointing out that you'll tend to see pretty strong influence in Aries. We've also noticed a very strong influence at planets at 29 degrees and Mars in Pisces. And we should probably look at this. We've got that new moon opposite Pluto. Pluto is important because it rules plutonium, because they're injecting energy into each other. So 115 was when they heard the boom because the valve was locked open. So Uranus is at 20 degrees of Scorpio, a water sign, and it's trining Mars in water. So let's go see. I'll really quickly check 4 p.m. and see what if we can learn anything from that, like where the ascendant was or something. Okay, so the moon is in a more exact alignment in opposition to Pluto now, and the ascendant is conjunct Saturn and the North Node. So I think that's interesting, conjunct Saturn. Where the ascendant lies is important, and we'll especially see that in the Chernobyl incident, because I believe it was actually conjunct Uranus. But the ascendant conjunct Saturn is also important because Saturn is stop things. It's an obstacle. It's a hard stop. So that kind of makes sense too in relationship to the situation. Okay, so now let's go look at Chernobyl, and we're going to start. I have 2 charts for Chernobyl. We're going to start with the first chart. I think this was the first chart in December of 1983. Oh, this is when it began operations. Okay. So this is like a birth chart for Chernobyl when it began operations. And I don't know if the time is accurate because, like I said, I had watched that miniseries and I was really paying attention because in that miniseries, he did a really good job of noting the time and dates of things. So that may actually be the exact time. It may just be random that it happened to be when I drew up the chart, but it may also be. Actually, now that I look at it, it's conjunct Uranus. I'm almost positive. I am going to go back and watch the Chernobyl miniseries again, but I'm almost positive that this information came either from that miniseries or I did some research on my own, and that this was when it actually started its operations. And the reason why I know that's true is because I remember when I did that research and I was very careful to be accurate about the time, and I noticed that the ascendant was conjunct Uranus and the South Node. See, I don't think it's an accident that in all of these charts the important planets are in conjunction with the nodes. The reason why that matters is because it has something to do with the eclipses, and eclipses always bring something karmic. So here we have the ascendant conjunct Uranus, Uranus conjunct the South Node conjunct Jupiter, Jupiter conjunct the Sun, and the Sun conjunct Neptune. Yeah, I just feel like there was something very karmic that happened at that moment. Oh, and Neptune is opposite the moon. Oh, and there was, look at this. It's a full moon. Oh my gosh. And it's an eclipse. For a full moon, 12 degrees is definitely an eclipse, definitely a full moon eclipse. And the interesting thing is that full moon opposite Neptune, because Neptune again is about meltdown, and it's also some kind of deception, deceit, missing information, delusion. You know, at the beginning they may have actually thought everything was fine. They may have actually really believed it. There was missing information and delusion, and so that is super interesting. The ascendant is conjunct Uranus. It's also conjunct the South Node at the time of the total, well, it's not a total full moon eclipse, but it's definitely a full moon eclipse conjunct and opposite Neptune. That's super, super powerful. It's also interesting that Pluto has just moved into 1 degree Scorpio, rules Scorpio, Scorpio's death. So that's super interesting. Okay, then some 3 years later, we had the actual incident. So I'll pull that chart up. April 26, 1986. And we've got the North Node at 29 degrees of Aries and Mercury in Aries. Look here again. And again, I took the exact time. They actually had it down to the second. 1:23:45 a.m., April 26, 1986. The ascendant is conjunct Uranus in Sagittarius. Saturn's there as well. Saturn's the shutdown. Neptune and Mars, Capricorn. Now, Mars before in the other two was in Pisces, but it's interesting here that Mars is conjunct Neptune. Even because 8 degrees is still a conjunction. So that's interesting because now all 3 charts we're seeing this connection of Mars to Neptune, Mars to Pisces, which is ruled by Neptune. I think there's something to it. And because Mars is fire and Neptune is dissolution. So together they create the meltdown. And let's see what else we can see in this. We've got a Jupiter square to Uranus and Saturn. And again, we've got the nodes at 29 degrees of Aries and Libra and Pluto there, because that's what we had seen at 3 Mile Island too. Pluto was conjunct the South Node. And here it is again, conjunct the South Node. See what else we can say about this. Venus isn't quite at 29 degrees, but pretty damn close. Yeah, it was like a very karmic thing. I think all 3 of these events were very karmic. Certainly the Chernobyl karmic, but I think the 3 Mile Island was karmic. And I think in a way that Fukushima was also karmic.